Thank you very much. Please be seated. Welcome to this extraordinary meeting of the Council as provided for under Rule 4 of the Council's Procedure Rules. Please note there is no scheduled fire alert, and if you do hear a fire alarm, please follow the advice of the security officers here this evening. Please note this meeting may be filmed or recorded by the Council for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting using any communication method. Although we ask members of the public recording, filming or reporting on the meeting not to include the public seating areas, members of the public attending the meeting should be aware that we cannot guarantee that you will not be filmed or recorded by others attending the meeting. Members of the public participating in the meeting, for example making deputations, should be aware that they are likely to be filmed, recorded or reported on. By entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of these images and sound recordings. As Chair of the meeting, I have the discretion to terminate or suspend filming or recording if, in my opinion, continuation of the filming, recording or reporting would disrupt or prejudice the proceedings, infringe the rights of any individual, or may lead to the breach of a legal obligation by the Council. Item 2, apologies for absence.
Mr Mayor, we have received apologies for absence from Councillor Reith and Councillor Weston, and I believe for lateness from Councillor Elliott.
Thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. Under the Council's agreed Code of Conduct, members are required to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or prejudicial interest as defined by the Code at any meeting and may not participate in any discussion or vote on the matter and must withdraw from the meeting room. Details of the requirement to make a declaration of interest are shown on your printed summons at item 4. Should you need to make any such declaration, you should do so now by clearly stating the reasons and the nature of the interest. Members with a sensitive interest as defined in the Code must declare that they have a disclosable interest, but the details of their interest need not be disclosed. Would anyone like to declare an interest? Item 4. I had accepted 2 deputations for this evening's meeting, but 1 has withdrawn. I call on Sam Leggett, who is joined by Ibrahim Agil, Franklin Thomas and Amina Gower. So I'd call Sam Leggett to speak, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for allowing us to come here tonight. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sam Leggett, and I've lived on the Northumberland Park estate for 36 years. This is my friend Franklin Thomas. He's lived there from 1973. We live on the other 2 people I apologise for. They haven't been able to get here. Sorry about that. But we all live on the Northumberland Park within the Red Line area, and we're here to tell you that we don't want our homes knocked down. This area has been systematically run down over the past few years, while councillors have taken expensive trips to the south of France to sell Northumberland Park to the highest bidders. When they look at our estate, they see minus values. When we look at the same estates, we see the huge value in the community the HDV plan intends to rip apart and throw away. Developers see profit. We see the loss and devastation this would have caused in our community. There's been much talk about consultation, door knocking, positive, even eager response to the plan. In reality, these shiny plans of a shiny new area where the sun is always shining and people are always smiling was never meant for us. 1,009 homes at social rent will be demolished. We have yet to receive a definitive answer to the question of how many will be built and on what terms. Similarly, the issue of right to return. Haringey Council continue to assure us we have a guaranteed right on the same terms. However, they have apparently promised Lend-Lease the exact opposite, with the one-move policy being prioritised. Also, we would question how our tenancy would be on the same terms, given we would have a shared landlord at best. Many leaseholders are particularly concerned as to their future, given the developments on Love Lane Estate, where leaseholders have waited 3 years so far for a promised swap, with many being put under pressure to sell in what is still a voluntary process, with the council appearing to target the most vulnerable, referring to them as low-hanging fruit. We recognise there are problems in the area, but this plan is not the answer. This is more than about the demolition of our homes, it's about the demolition of our lives. The real answer is investment. Millions have been poured into the area over the past 15 years or so. Where has it gone? And what tangible improvements do we have to show for it? What is really needed is investment in desperately needed council homes at rents that are really affordable to working families, plus the renovation and renewal of existing stock we have paid for. Please stop peddling the length of the waiting list as some sort of selling point and really address it. We also need a ballot. Stop treating us as if we're too stupid to see the big picture. Please include us, consult with us, listen to us. A yes-no ballot on all and any demolition proposals is what we deserve. We'd like to thank the councillors for giving us this time and listening. This is your chance to speak up for the people who have elected you. These estates do not belong to the big developers who want to turn them into money-making properties. The people of Tottenham need homes. We respectfully recommend the original resolution should be strengthened to ensure no HDV, no demolition of our estates. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Leggett. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Sam, could you come up to the lectern again? Good to see you again. And thank you so much for coming along. I've got a couple of questions for you. You may remember we both featured in the same Financial Times article, making similar points, I think. The first question is, how does this HDV affect you personally, and do you think you would come back after being away for some distance and for some time? Thank you very much.
The HDV has affected me personally in several ways. One, it's extremely good. The plan of the HDV is extremely good if you want to lose some weight quickly, because the worry means you don't sleep, you don't eat. You're constantly worried about what will happen, where will I go, how will I manage to live. I'm going to retire in 2 years, okay? My place where I work, where I've worked for over 30 years, is due to be demolished as well. The prospect of trying to get another job now at my age and being able to afford what is so-called affordable rents that will be provided is non-existent. I don't think there's any future for me here or for my children. And would I come back? I don't think I would have the choice. I think the only possibility of me coming back would probably be for a day trip to point out, you know, the shiny new homes and say I used to live there. And moving is so stressful. Why would I move away, you know, set up a new network somewhere, wherever I get moved to, and then maybe 10, 15 years down the line want to come back and start again? No, I wouldn't come back, no.
Councillor Haringey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sam, very much for that very telling description and very personal one as well. I just want to ask you, there's a motion before this council to stop the HGV, and there's a Labour amendment to not go ahead to decide on it until after the election. Would you like to stop it now, please?
The HGV needs to be stopped in its tracks right now.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Amin.
Sam, hi, how are you? As you know, I've been door knocking and talking to residents. Along with Claire, Alan and Barbara, I've knocked on every door in the estate. Can I just finish my question? Okay. So you know that I've talked to residents and I'm in constant contact with residents. So when I've door knocked, I've got different views. So what would you say to residents who live there at the moment and who are unlikely to get what they wanted, which is they wanted big change and redevelopment?
I think they wanted the dream that was sold to them. People that we've spoken to, and you actually didn't knock on my door because I'd have invited you in for a cup of tea, but I may have been at work, but so we won't split hairs. The people who have said that they're in favour, they're buying into the dream that they've been sold, that this is going to be accessible to everybody, that it's going to be. When they see the pictures and they say, "Gosh, that looks really lovely," and then they suddenly realise that it's probably not going to be for me. Right? They've also been told that they're going to get, if they've got several children, they're going to get bigger homes. What I read last week in a report was that it was sort of a room-for-room replacement. So how are you going to give bigger homes if they've already got 2 bedrooms? Why are they going to get bigger homes? Also, I don't think people are fully aware of the implications of affordable, because affordable is a very misleading term. What is affordable to one person is not affordable to another. 80% of current market value rent still means you're going to have to be paying out up to £1,000 a month in rent. My daughter, who is living on the high road, right, she is currently paying £300 a week for a 2-bedroom, run-down, dilapidated flat on top of her. So, you build brand new houses. Lend-Lease is in it for profit. They don't want to build houses at low rent. They don't want to build social housing, so they're going to build things that are going to make them money. I'm very sorry for the people who believe that they are going to get a nice new home with a new garden. I've heard people say it to me, I'm going to get a 4-bedroom house with a garden. I'm very sorry for their dreams being shattered. But it's not me that's shattering them. I never gave them those dreams. And sorry.
Councillor Brabazon.
Tell me, Sam, have you been told directly in consultation or by people who've knocked on your door or in meetings exactly what's going to happen to the block in which you live or in which Franklin lives? Do you know exactly what the plans are? What exactly have you been told?
Franklin, would you like to say anything about what you've been told? Sorry.
I had been told that the time scale is something like 20 years and won't be affected straight away. I had been told that it was 20-year time scale or something like that, so we shouldn't really worry about it. I mean, any kind of demolition of your home, you should be worried about it, because we wasn't consulted about any matter. Well, your home's being knocked down. You're going to get a nice new kitchen, but you ain't going to have no bedroom to sleep in. Why, what, and I'm saying to myself, what is the lack of consultation? Surely, of something that big, right, you should have been consulted in the first place rather than having at the last minute be told that your house is going to be demolished. It's a complete lack of consultation.
Personally, I think the term consultation is a little misleading, because I went to a fun day where we were invited to put leaves on a pretend tree to say what we would like to see in the area. And as far as I remember, not one of those leaves on the tree said, "I would like to see my home knocked down." It's never been said. I was told that my home would probably be on the site that was probably planned for the new school to be built, but there's a lot of probablys. My home's been surveyed 5 times in the past 6 years to see if I'm eligible for a new kitchen, and I was given a new kitchen finally last year, just before Christmas, which led everybody to believe that, okay, if they're giving us a new kitchen, they're not going to knock us down. So now we don't quite know what to believe, but that's my experience of the consultation. Does that answer it? Thank you.
Okay, no more questions. I call on the Cabinet Member for Housing, Regeneration and Planning to respond to the deputation.
Thank you very much. Sam, thank you very much, and good to see you again. So as you know, we've obviously talked about this on a number of occasions, and I know absolutely where you're coming from, and respect your views, absolutely somebody who lives on the estate and has got real concerns. But I just wanted to run through some of the issues you raised and try and offer some clarity and some reassurance. The first thing to say is that the estate has not been run down by the council. As you said quite rightly, in terms of the Decent Homes investment in your own flat, money is being spent on the estate through Decent Homes, but also through the regeneration team. There's a whole team of staff who've been working on that estate, not just to improve some of the housing problems people have raised with us when we've gone round to talk, but also we've pushed very hard the Met Police. They've now moved, and Eugene's worked very hard on this, to push extra officers, extra resource into the estate to deal with the very serious gang issues, discharge of firearms, drug dealing, which again has come up on the doorstep again and again and again, which is incredibly important. So, there is investment being made by the council and by the rest of the public sector. In terms of this question of moving and staying on the estate, I know from talking to hundreds of tenants on the estate myself, but also talking to tenants on the Love Lane estate and in other regeneration areas, that obviously discussions about moving, even with all the right commitments, the right guarantees, as you said quite rightly, it's very stressful. It is traumatic for people to think about moving home, and that's why we've worked very hard in partnership with tenants and leaseholders to make sure that we've got clear commitments. Those commitments have been agreed by the Cabinet, and they set out very clearly that no tenant or leaseholder will be left worse off, that homes will be re-provided, that tenants will have a right to return, but actually makes clear that for most tenants and leaseholders, they would actually have a right to stay. So as far as possible, most tenants would move within the estate from their existing home, if that particular block was being demolished, into a brand new block. So huge amounts of work is being done and would continue to be done on any estate that might have significant change, either renovation or demolition, to protect tenants in that way. And it's really important to say that there was a question about, have you been told whether your block's definitely being demolished? Well, the answer is no, because no decision has been made about which block may or may not be demolished. There are years of consultation still to come. More resident consultation. There are no detailed plans for the estate. There needs to be a statutory Section 105 consultation, which by law we have to have with tenants, and that's before you get anywhere near the planning consultation that, of course, would happen when detailed plans were drawn up with residents. And on the Love Lane estate, as you might know, tenants and leaseholders were involved in, well, are still involved in, the design panel. They're working with the architects to design their own new homes, their own new estates. People are heavily involved. In terms of officers, and I know you've mentioned this before, in terms of Love Lane, I would strongly reject any suggestion that council staff are pressuring vulnerable tenants to make decisions. I've been out on that estate with officers, I've been to meetings, I've been door knocking with the staff, I've seen how they interact with tenants, and it's their relationships that I think are professional, are based on trust, and many of those tenants have been talking to us for many, many years before they've made any decision. On the affordable rent question, there is no suggestion at all, there's never been any suggestion that existing council tenants on your estate or any estate would be switched on to higher affordable rents. The document agreed by Cabinet that's on the council website in black and white makes really clear that people who choose to stay on the same estate would get a flat at the same rent, and of course residents who choose to move elsewhere to council properties again would still pay a council rent. So that is set out very, very clearly, and our commitment as a Labour Council go beyond what we're required to do by law, but importantly what Cabinet has agreed goes beyond what most Labour London councils offer their tenants and leaseholders. So that doesn't mean, I agree entirely, that doesn't mean it's easy, it doesn't mean it isn't incredibly stressful for people who are having these conversations, but we've done all we can as Labour Council to go beyond what others have done to protect tenants and leaseholders. On the issue of the ballot, I made clear earlier in the year that we did not hold ballots. Other councils don't hold ballots because the Mayor of London's guidance recommended against them. The Mayor is now consulting on guidance which recommends that ballots do happen, and if the Mayor changes his guidance, we will change our practice and our policy. There's no sort of big deal about that. And just to finish, I just wanted to finish by picking up a point that Councillor Amin made, which is that I think we have to be honest, don't we, that this is incredibly complex. There are over 1,100 homes. 1,100 homes on this estate, and I know from my own door knocking in the last couple of years that you can go to one block where people are against regeneration and not convinced by it. You can go to the next block and people say, when's it going to happen? Because there are serious issues. I don't like living on this estate and I want to move. And you find everything in between. So the challenge is to find solutions that work for everybody, and that's why tenant and leaseholder choice is so important. It's not for me or anyone in this room to tell individual tenants or leaseholders what they should do, where they should go, what sort of house they should live in. That's why tenant choice is at the heart of what we're doing. I'd also say what's clear in those conversations is that nobody has been sold some sort of airy-fairy dream. Everybody I've talked to is perfectly aware of how difficult this is, how complex this is, but some tenants, and in my experience many tenants, are up for a conversation around how they get a better home on that estate with better facilities, with less crime, with fewer gangs, with better schools, with better green space, with better health facilities. That's what people have been asking for, and that's what I hope the Council will keep talking to residents about, consulting on, and eventually will deliver something that tenants and leaseholders are happy with.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes this item. Can you please join me in a round of applause as the deputation leaves the chamber and moves to the public gallery where they can observe the rest of the meeting. Thank you very much. Just before we move on to the next item, can I just ask the members of the public not to disrupt the meeting, because it's difficult to hear what people say, and I believe we need to hear what people say. So can I ask you not to disrupt the meeting? Thank you. Item 5, to consider a response from the Council in relation to issues raised in the motion. I've accepted the report published after the dispatch of the summons, and I invite the Cabinet Member, Housing, Regeneration and Planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I formally move the report as the issues will be covered in the following item.
Thank you very much for that. Item 6. Motion. We have one motion for debate. First, can I ask Councillor Angott to propose her motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Every councillor in this chamber chose to join a political party. They're an essential part of our democracy. They connect isolated individuals and turn them into movements that can achieve social change. But they can also have a darker side when loyalty to your team becomes a barrier to doing exactly the things that made you become a politician. And I'm afraid that the amendment Labour are putting forward is a sorry example of this trap. We heard just a moment ago from the residents of Northumberland Park that not knowing the future is seriously impacting on their health and welfare. Yet Labour are putting forward an amendment that prioritises the unity of the Labour Party over the residents' need for certainty. Moderates and momentumites cannot agree what to say, so they've said nothing. This amendment is waffle that keeps the HGV alive. I say enough. The HGV saga has gone on long enough. It should have come to an end months ago when a Lib Dem spearheaded scrutiny report found that the HGV was an unacceptable risk both to the residents' welfare and the council's finances. Instead, Labour have kept it going, and with this amendment, they're trying to save it again. It is all very well Labour councillors telling their local branches or The Guardian how much they oppose the HGV, but it's time for them to oppose it where it matters, here in the council chamber. I know officers have said the developer lend-lease is low risk. I respectfully disagree with their assessment as laid out in the report before us. Lend-lease has a substantial UK pension deficit, which I can find no mention of in any officer report. However, Lend-lease Group in their 2016 annual report are quite clear on the subject. They state that the deficit of the UK arm requires an annual deficit recovery payment of 13.8 million Australian dollars, which was agreed as an annual payment until 2020. Worryingly, Lend-Lease in Scotland saw their revenue slump almost 62% to 17.8 million after the Brexit vote, down from 46.4 million the prior year, when it had reported pre-tax losses of 1.5 million. In the 2017 operating losses widened to 5.9 million. To me, that makes the chances of Lend-Lease in the UK collapsing seem rather more likely than the report suggests. As to the reassurance that government guidelines were followed during procurement, I'm afraid those guidelines did not stop the government giving many key contracts to the now collapsed Carillion, despite the warning signs, and the differences officers note between Lend-Lease and Carillion business models gives me no comfort either, as they apparently have a mix of business weighted towards higher margin activities, which naturally makes one wonder how high is the margin for Lend-Lease on the HGV. Zooming out from the details of Lend-Lease's finances to view the scheme as a whole, things don't look much better. The myriad risks, the failure of the council to properly consult residents, the bizarre idea that putting so many of this council's, no, our residents' assets into one big pot, a pot that the council will not even have the control of. What are we doing to the residents of this borough? Are we doing them a great service? The reassurance residents want will not come from procurement systems or officers' financial assessments. It will come from us as councillors exercising leadership rather than dithering and invading. Full council is a decision-making body. Well, Mr Mayor, the time for us is to make a decision now. Don't hide behind judicial reviews or the possibility that another meeting will choose for you. Give residents the certainty they need, end this HGV and pass this motion unamended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haringey. Can I ask, call on Councillor Morris to second the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The last time the Haringey Lib Dems called an extraordinary meeting was in 2009, so this is not something the Lib Dems do lightly. This is what we do as an opposition group when there is a crisis in Haringey Council, and that crisis is the Haringey Development Vehicle. But the crisis runs even deeper here in Haringey. Not only has there been a deep split within the ruling Labour group, and we have seen the Labour group tearing itself apart in the most public way possible, there has also been a series of failings in the democratic process for the HDV. Scrutiny committees play a critical role in Haringey. The Cross-Party Housing and Regen Scrutiny Committee recommended to stop the HDV, and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommended a pause, but the Cabinet and the leader did not listen. They have not listened to the Lib Dem group, who have called in the HDV several times. They've not listened to the 2 Labour MPs in Haringey or their own backbenchers, or most importantly, their residents. Furthermore, the HDV was not in Labour's 2014 election manifesto, which means residents have never had the opportunity to vote on the HDV. It is for these reasons, together with the scale of the HDV and the risk that the Lib Dems have always pressed for a public debate and a vote on the HDV by all councillors at a full council meeting. There is an alternative model to build homes in Haringey, and the Lib Dems launched our housing policy last week, where we clearly set out how Haringey Council can create a wholly council-owned development company which does not give away the council assets. It puts residents at the heart of their plans and gives the council 100% control. It may not deliver the same number of homes as the HDV, and it may not deliver them as quickly, but it is a model that has united councils of all political persuasions, Lib Dem, Labour and Conservative, who are building homes that their residents need rather than homes that developers or joint venture partners want to build. I therefore call on those 22 Labour members who want to stop the HDV to vote against your group's amendments to delay the decision on the HDV. Delay is not stop. You know who you are, and I hope you'll stand up for residents and for what you believe in. Tonight you need to vote for stop, not delay.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. I've received an amendment to this motion under the name of Councillor Cober. I call on her to move the amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Let me start just by responding directly to the Liberal Democrats and to say this is a policy that we've been discussing for 3 years in this chamber, and for 2 of those years you said very little. In fact, when I looked through the minutes, the main representations you made on the HDV is that it should include a swimming pool in Wood Green. Now, the one piece of advice I'd give you as a group is please do not mistake the enthusiasm of a minority for the support of a majority. I know that some people feel that I've talked a lot about the housing crisis and the nature of that crisis in Haringey, but I'm going to say it again. 3,000 families in temporary accommodation in this borough, 9,000 on the council waiting list. And if you've heard those figures before, I'll tell you some other figures. 1 in 29 people in this borough are either sleeping rough or are in temporary accommodation. That is not a situation that can be sustained. Since 2011, there's been a 50% reduction in the number of socially rented units coming available each year in this borough. And if the social impact doesn't move you, we'll look at the financial impact. It's costing us £7 million a year out of our general fund budget just to pay for temporary accommodation. It gives me absolutely, let me be very clear to everyone in this chamber, I have no pleasure in proposing this amendment, because I still believe, I believe as firmly today, and it may not be a popular belief, but I believe it, that the HDV is the best solution available to us, because politics means engaging in the world as it is rather than the world as we may want it to be. Engaging with the world where councils do not have the money, the expertise, the capacity to bring forward council housing in the way that we would want to. So that means we have to work in partnership. So, for those of you who say it's not the right solution, I simply say that any solution has to begin with building more. more socially rented units, more council homes, more affordable homes, more housing of all types. But look, we're still awaiting a judicial review decision. We're fast approaching purdah, and therefore it is right that this decision is a decision for the new administration. I would say simply to that administration, that doing the right thing, that approaching issues with with an open mind is the right way to do politics in Haringey. Not putting things in the too difficult box, not saying we can avoid making real decisions, not selling people fantasy dreams, but making real decisions for real people. So I ask the new administration to do that. I want to just say two final things before I close and move the amendment. The first is to remind people of something that was said almost 35 years ago, and that is that you cannot play politics with people's jobs, people's services, people's homes and people's lives. And the second is a slightly more personal point, which is there have been a group of councillors, myself included, who have knocked on hundreds of doors of tenants on the Northumberland Park estate over the summer. And we've had many, many conversations. And I just want to say that to people that I've spoken to who are desperate for a chance of regeneration, for whom the decision tonight means more delay, more uncertainty, less ability to move on in their lives, I feel very sorry, and I say sorry to you. People like Aaron, people like Felix, people like Fatima, people like Sean, people like Vania, people like Jennifer, people like Gunell, Dean, Namika and Emrakan. I am sorry. I move the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Cover. Before I call the seconder, I just want to say that in the main, the public and the councillors here have been behaving very well, and we've been able to hear the debate. But I've got to say, there's a handful of people who are disrupting the meeting, and I can see people in the gallery are trying to shush them because they want to hear what's going on. In particular, the gentleman on the right at the front row there is making a lot of noise, and a woman over there. And I just want to say this to you, and I want to say to the security, this is a warning that if you carry on disrupting the meeting, I will ask security to remove you. So please, do be quiet and listen to the debate. Thank you very much. And I now call upon Councillor Strickland to second the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say that what we've heard tonight from the Lib Dems fits a familiar pattern that on these benches we've heard from our opposition every year, certainly in the 8 years I've been a councillor, which is politics driven by press release rather than by public service. The motion tonight is completely disingenuous for a number of reasons. Firstly, the Leader of the Opposition said that building new homes, schools, parks and GP surgeries is harming people's health and well-being. But actually, as the Leader said, when you talk to many residents on that estate, it's the present conditions on that estate that are doing so much damage to people's health and well-being. And as I said earlier, it is important that as an administration, we are able to have those difficult conversations, not shy away from things because we want some nice headlines. The second thing is that we've heard repeatedly tonight the Lib Dems saying, well, vote for our motion, it will stop the HGV. But as the Lib Dems will be fully aware, because it's written in the report in front of them, the Council's legal service has said quite clearly, and I quote, that executive decisions, this is on the HGV, executive decisions have been lawfully taken by the Cabinet on the HGV, and full Council does not have the power to seek to reverse them. So claims that this evening is some big sort of summit to stop the HGV, the report from officers says that's actually impossible because this is not the right meeting to make that decision. So yet again, Lib Dems leading the public up the garden path. Gail complains, the Councillor Engert complains that Lend-Lease have got a pension deficit and can't be trusted. Well, Haringey Council has got a pension deficit. Which again... So I think highlighting... Always good to bring mirth to the gallery. My point clearly being that singling out organisations with pension deficits, which many councils have, as some marker of an organisation that can't be trusted, is clearly absolute nonsense. We've heard tonight from the Lib Dems that we're putting all of our eggs in one basket, all of our regeneration options in one pot. Again, we have talked at Cabinet, at scrutiny, at full council. This is not true at all. The HGV is one part of the council's plans. We also have London's biggest housing zone with funding from Sadiq Khan. We have a partnership with a housing association to build more affordable housing. The council's building its own affordable homes as well. Many things are being done. We then heard from the Lib Dems that we've been dithering. I cannot for the life of me believe, of all the things you could accuse the administration of, that dithering on regeneration could possibly be one. And it says it all. In the 7 years I've been in Cabinet, we've never heard any alternatives from the Lib Dems. But lo and behold, they produced one side of A4 sometime last week, we hear, a plan that, from my maths, would provide between 700 and 1,000 homes, not the 6,500 the HGV would deliver, and add to that the 5,000 we're delivering through the housing zone and the 1,000 we're delivering through the other things we're doing. So, as usual, Mr Mayor, I'll just summarise by saying what residents need, what residents want, is change, is ambitious plans delivered in partnership and consultation with them. What residents do not need is being misled by the opposition in believing this meeting has a purpose it doesn't have, and that believing that 700 new homes cooked up last week by the Lib Dems is somehow going to tackle the housing crisis.
Thank you, Councillor Strickland. We now have the debate. Members have up to 3 minutes for their contributions. Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Lib Dems called this extraordinary meeting in order for the Haringey development vehicle to be debated by all councillors at full council. We've heard recently in an article by the Labour leader in the Ham and High that neither the Lib Dems nor Labour initially opposed the HDV. I would like to publicly refute this. We, as the opposition party, only found out what the HDV actually entailed when it came through the cross-party Housing and Regen Scrutiny Committee. Once we found out the huge risks associated with this venture, we all called for this to be halted. We've also heard tonight that the HDV will help those on our waiting lists. How can it? Under this HDV scheme, there will be no new extra social houses built. So how will those 9,000 people on our housing waiting list even get a foothold on the housing ladder? We know through the Scrutiny Committee reports that there are enormous risks associated with the HDV, not least the £2 billion worth of public assets that will be sunk into this venture. As my colleagues have mentioned tonight, as Lib Dems, we would like to develop a wholly owned council development company where we would work with our communities to provide not only an increase in decent social housing, but also genuinely affordable housing that residents and everyone can enjoy and afford. So why call this extraordinary meeting? We have heard that the HDV will be delayed until after the elections, but I would argue that the time for delay has passed. This Labour Cabinet should have halted the HDV as soon as the major risks were identified by the Scrutiny Committee, or when the HDV was taken to the High Court for judicial review, or even when their own backbench support was hemorrhaging away. In Labour's amended motion, they claim that the councillors were told in January that the HDV would not be signed until after the election. No Lib Dem councillors have any record of this decision. So to stop the HDV, we are calling on our fellow Labour councillors to vote with us. Your vote is crucial in stopping the HDV now. So I hope that the 22 Labour councillors who voted in the Labour meeting just a few weeks ago to stop the HDV will now come out from behind those closed doors to send a clear message tonight. Councillors, don't vote on the amendment. Support our motion to stop the HDV. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connor. Call on Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wasn't intending on speaking, but I'd just like to correct two inaccuracies. one in the speeches by the Leader and Deputy Leader of the Opposition, the second in their amendments. Firstly, the scrutiny work and its reports were thorough. They were, however, not spearheaded by the Liberal Democrats. I can be certain of this because 80% of the membership of the parent Ovian Scrutiny Committee and its 4 panels, including the Housing Regeneration Scrutiny Panel, is Labour. I know as I sat on the HRSP. The original motion of the HRSP to recommend a pause in the HTV was proposed by a Labour councillor, myself, and supported by the full HRSP and subsequently the full Ovian Scrutiny Committee by the panel on a unanimous and cross-party basis. Secondly, the amendment properly recognises the constitutional status and limitations of full council, as outlined in section 810 of the Agenda Item 5 report. The amendment also respects the fact that an incumbent administration cannot seek to bind any new administration not yet formed. The original motion does not. As such, I support the amendment.
Call on Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak about the biggest policy issue facing our borough, an opportunity afforded in a democratic country. Carillion and Siglian are claimed to have no bearing on the HDV. It was accepted before Carillion's collapse that the HDV did present risks, but these have been airily dismissed as there's always risk. There seems to be no attempt to quantify risk, or given the failure of other similar joint ventures, to suspect that this may be highly risky. The general lesson here is that a company that looks strong by most accounting measures can become bankrupt within 18 months. This episode has been an indictment of leadership and governance. That it reached this stage and has been before the High Court is something we should all try to avoid again. Our current governance model is too vulnerable to an overweening leader and cabinet. Having a member of the opposition chair scrutiny would not by itself be enough. This is not a marriage of equals. There's no doubt that the HDV would be owned 50% by the council, but control is another matter. That 50% ownership is relevant only when our assets are going in and when they would come out on a liquidation. But between beginning and end, it represents at best a blocking action. It's a recipe for either argument or giving way. In between, day-to-day control would be in the hands of the partner and largely in the long term also. The opposition, indeed all in the council except the cabinet, had little opportunity to see information. It would have been opportune to pause at the scrutiny stage, as already been mentioned, the call-in stage, the MP concern stage. So many opportunities were missed to pause this earlier. There's no such thing as a free lunch, which is how the Cabinet seems to see the HDV. It's an attempt at a shortcut to housing, but it's a shortcut that has been greatly overreached. One of the aspects of the HDV is the excessive influence of a developer lobbying firm. The procurement process has a number of questions hanging over it that would seem to justify some form of investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Can I call on Councillor Ibrahim, please?
I'm not going to make a speech. I just want to clarify some facts that I want to challenge in terms of what the Liberal Democrats have said. The Liberal Democrats did not oppose the HDV when it was first proposed. At the earliest opportunity to oppose the HDV was when it went to a no due process, and that went through Cabinet. I do not recall the Liberal Democrats opposing it at that stage. But also, in terms of, whilst as chair of the Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny Panel, I certainly welcomed the contribution of the Liberal Democrats, the view was always that they were not opposed to it in principle, and that was always portrayed to the rest of the panel. In fact, there were numerous accusations that were levelled of ideology that came from the Liberal Democrats. So I think what we need to be clear is that what we've learnt over the last few weeks is that trust is important. And I think it's completely wrong of the Liberal Democrats to mislead the public gallery and to suggest to them that this full council can actually stop this process. And in fact, I find it deeply worrying that the Liberal Democrats throughout the scrutiny process and this evening failed to understand the constitution of the council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ibrahim. I now call on Councillor Engert to respond to the debate. Oh, sorry. One more speaker. Councillor Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's been interesting for everyone over the last few weeks to see just how much public interest there has been in this, and the council leader gaining such a media profile, even in yesterday's Evening Standard. That was just one of many. But it's been even more interesting to see how, as the rug has been progressively pulled from underneath the HDV project, that our very own Iron Lady was not for turning. That is, until the Liberal Democrats brought this extraordinary council meeting into being. And that has produced the opportunity for this to be debated, for the public to have a say, and for to actually put some of the facts into this debate. There's many issues, as well as the housing. The businesses, more than 500 business leases would go into the HDV, and that and the High Road West scheme, which is closely related, it's also with Lend-Lease, it's for £1 billion worth of development, shows the contempt that this authority or this Labour administration has had for the businesses that will be displaced from there. Some 30 businesses there on the Peacock estate and nearby, all long established, at least one for 60 years. Moving them, relocating them is talked about airily, but the reality of that is very, very hard to do. Where is the space? And when there was space available at 500 White Hart Lane, which is a very big employment site, it was given away for housing. It needn't have been, it could have been defended as employment. The council's lack of commitment on that has been really very significant. As one of my colleagues has said, it was never in the manifesto and no resident voted for this. The scrutiny of the policy has been ignored. So why was this done? In the end, it's not about the temporary housing, it's not about the waiting list, both of which are huge, but neither of which will really be addressed by the type of housing that will be produced. The driving force, the driving force for this was always the increase in council tax that would come from it, from the properties that would be created. The right of return, yes, that's likely to be for the few, not the many, given experience from elsewhere. But there would be full council tax from every property, and that was the heart of the reasons for doing it. In terms of risk, in terms of scale, in terms of the damage it has every potential to do to people's lives, it is more or less the Bitcoin of housing development. And the right of return, we know from elsewhere that the vast majority will not return, as you've heard from Sam Leggett. Stop HDV was, I must give a few tributes. Stop HDV with Phil Rose and Phil Jackson spoke at the call-in of this. Gordon Peters brought the JR, and the indefatigable Paul Burnham with the Defend Council, Haringey Council Housing are just a few of the names, and I'm really sorry that I haven't been able to name any of the multitude of others who've taken part in so many ways. But more than any words,
can you finish now, please, Councillor?
More than any words, it is the broad consensus and that has brought this HDV to the point now where we have a choice of stop or pause. And truly, any victory in this is the people's.
Okay, thank you very much. We were allowed not 30 minutes for this debate. We've gone well over that now, so I'm asking for Councillor Haringey to respond to the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion as amended is massively inadequate. It promises that a decision is not taken before PERDA starts, and then it will therefore be taken by the next administration. This is simply not true. Between the start of PERDA and the next Council AGM on the... Sorry, it's actually between the 3rd of May and the next Council AGM on the 24th of May, the current leader will still be in place and will retain the power to sign a deal with Lend-Lease. Think that's impossible? Something very similar happened in Bournemouth in 2007. The ruling administration, a Lib Dem one, I'm sorry to say, lost an election in part because of its plans to open a casino in the town centre. However, when the new administration finally took over, they discovered the outgoing council leader had signed a multi-million-pound deal with a casino operator. A few months later, a court ruled the council was bound by that contract. Now consider that. This deal was worth millions. The proposed agreement is worth billions. I'd like to say to the party opposite, there is no magic money tree. One of the Labour colleagues on Housing and Regen called this son of PFI. It's very similar to PFI under the Blair government, which saddled hospitals with huge repayments, which contributed to the NHS deficits we see today. In answer to Councillor Cobra about our involvement, we were given a presentation on a shiny dream, rather like the residents were, and it was only working through scrutiny and asking searching questions that we began to find out about the risks and what was involved in the HGV. And answering Councillor Amina, we were never against a small trial of an HGV. We said start small, try it and see. Don't put 2 million in and billion in at the start. Just start with a small trial and have a look, and then we can judge whether it's suitable for Haringey. But it is not acceptable to put 2 billion worth of public property into a development vehicle with a developer and hope they don't turn out to be Carillion. We, all of us, each one of us as councillors, are guardians of this borough's property. We hold it in trust for our residents. It's not ours to squander or risk, and we're in real danger of doing that, just that, if we councillors do not stop the HGV. However, even if there were to be a different developer, the HGV is clearly deeply flawed. It is not good enough, and it is no wonder people of this borough are up in arms when all you're offering is a massive, risky privatisation dressed us up as a means to deliver new homes. And as one of the other councillors has said, these are mainly going to be homes for sale, not going to home our homeless or the people on the waiting list. There will not be a single new council home built. Well, the Labour Cabinet Member for Housing admits there'd be poor doors on developments built on council land with council money. When a Labour Cabinet sat in this room defending a company accused of union blacklisting, where are your principles? The Liberal Democrats are clear that what we need is more homes for people on council waiting lists. Council homes. We need more affordable homes for local people struggling with high rent. What we do not need is another Haygate estate with exorbitantly priced flats, poor doors, poor consultation and a pitiful number of homes for social rent. That is why the Liberal Democrats say that what Haringey needs is to see the HDV stopped. Instead, Labour has compromised itself on a potential pause. That's not enough. Residents should not be left wondering if the HGV will someday be unpaused. They deserve to know this menace to their homes and their council finance is gone, that Labour has gone through a combination of weakness and division, unable to deliver that, will stain their reputation in this borough for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Enger. We will now vote on the amendment. If it is agreed, we will vote on the motion as amended. If it is not agreed, we will vote on the original motion. Okay, I have a request for a name vote, which I would agree to. We're now voting on the amendment. All those in favour... Yep. Okay. Chief Executive will do a name check. Thank you.
Councillors, I will call your name in alphabetical order. I would ask you to indicate whether you are voting for, against or abstaining. Councillor Adamu. Councillor Ajay. Councillor Ahmet. Councillor Aisi. Councillor Amin. Councillor Arthur. Councillor Basu, I believe, is absent. Councillor Beecham. Councillor Berryman. Councillor Bevan. Councillor Barbara Blake. Councillor Mark Blake. Councillor Brabazon. Councillor Claire Bull. Councillor Gideon Bull. Councillor Carroll. Councillor Carter. Councillor Christofides. Councillor Connor. Councillor De Mercy. Councillor Diakides. Councillor Doran. Councillor Ejiofor. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Engert. Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Goldberg. Councillor Griffith. Councillor Guinness. Councillor Hare. Councillor Hearn. Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor Jogi. Councillor Kober. Councillor Mallet. Councillor Jennifer Mann. Councillor Stephen Mann. Councillor McNamara. Councillor McShane. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Morris. Councillor Newton. Councillor Opoku. Councillor Osbeck. Councillor Patterson. Councillor Peacock. Councillor Reith, I believe, is absent. Councillor Rice. Councillor Ross. Councillor Sahota. Councillor Stennett. Councillor Strickland. Councillor Tucker. Councillor Vanya. Councillor Waters. Councillor Weston is absent. Councillor Wright.
Shame on you! Shame! The Labour Party is more important than the people of Scotland. We say stop the HDV! Stop the HDV!
I can announce the votes for the amendment 46. Those against 8. The amendment is agreed. We will now vote on the motion as amended. All those in favour of the motion as amended?
Okay.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion as amended. Sorry, the motion as amended is agreed. That concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you very much.